Futures trading involves risk and is not suitable for all investors. Content provided in this segment is meant for educational purposes and is not a solicitation to buy or sell commodities.
Hi, it's Steve and Joe from Fresh Agenda Ever.Ag's Global Insights team. And Steve, we're back with some, the usual market updates. This week's Pulse, US cheese stocks and charts of the week.
Market update. Joe, lead us out.
Yeah, just looking at skim milk powder futures, the NZX futures, they've really caught up with GDT trades in the last couple of weeks, Steve. So just a little higher there in those earlier months. Seems like there's a bit of improved optimism around the place, perhaps a feeling that the trade tariff impacts or the trade tariffs that are being announced are not quite as bad as they could have possibly been. And that's enough to make people just a bit more upbeat, Steve.
It's interesting, Joe, because there is, like we're dealing with Oceania, so New Zealand here, this, as we get closer to realising what sort of a season we're having, I mean, the indicators are pretty positive for that. Positive in terms of, we might have a similar start to last season. So there isn't going to be any challenge around that. But I guess at the same time, New Zealand's a more attractive supplier for many, European costs going up, US having less available. So, maybe some of this hand-to-mouth culture is being eroded a bit and people feeling a bit more confident about putting inventory away. So we speculate.
It's what we do. And it's a similar story for whole milk powder. GDT's receded a little bit from those highs that we saw, but we've seen a bit of a steadying on Pulse. And so those futures just flattened out a little bit, Steve, a little bit of a curve just reflecting the increased availability for the New Zealand spring. Again, as you were saying, more milk on the way. And then across to Europe now, we've been watching for a while these, fresh milk, cream and butter prices and how they're moving together. There does appear to be a lot less anxiety about supply, maybe a lot less anxiety altogether, Steve, because everyone's basically in holiday mode in Europe, it seems. All liquid spot prices continue to sort of relax. They've sort of steadied a little bit in the last week or so. EU butter is now at a 15% tariff though, Steve.
Into the US. Yeah.
Into the US. So, fairly important market, particularly for that yummy Irish Kerrygold butter. Perhaps not as perceived as being not as bad as a no-deal outcome, but do you think this is where it's going to end, Steve?
Well, it's funny. I read a bit of news release and opinion about this after this announcement on the weekend after probably a bad game of golf. An Irish minister speculated that this is a much better outcome than what we could have had if we didn't have a deal, but at the same time suggesting we might get this one down to zero tariff because there are precedents for that.
Exemptions,
yeah, and I would say good luck with that. You've got an administration in the US which has previously higher tariff on dairy, and the industry in the US would have to lobby about in that respect. So, the tariff into the US is effectively 70 US cents a pound at these new rates, which is hefty. But then again, as you say, it's a highly favoured product in that US market, and is it really price sensitive? It's a bit like Ever.Ag in Australia, another excellent butter. So looking at futures, butter's steadied on the EX. It's, with that news in the background, so that, be harder to get more volume away. That's, as the holidays drift in, maybe this is just a bit of a malaise here, but, there's less, as you said, less anxiety around supply.
Just looking though, Steve, at some of the over-the-counter trades that we've seen booked for last week for these same periods that the futures contracts are covering, you can just see those October and November trades are below where the futures are sitting, around €100 a tonne. So that's an interesting observation, Steve. Perhaps the actual trades are seeing things a little bit differently from the futures market at the moment.
Clearly the most interesting chart so far, Joe, this one. Over to the US, where this is getting a bit boring because it keeps dipping. I mean, there was a rally last week in the futures if we look week to week, but, cheese market continued to weaken slightly, and the spot is well below $3,700 a tonne on that. So it's a good deal lower than this. We'll talk more about that in a little while because we have a bit of cheese to discuss. Over to Pulse. And Joe, interesting results.
Yeah, a bit of a mixed result. This is the second, obviously, consecutive Pulse event that we had this month because we've got 5 Tuesdays. Whole milk powder regular lifted by $20 a tonne, only 0.5% on the prior Pulse event. And that was $80 a tonne or 2.1% on the GDT auction number 384. So, just steadying for whole milk powder there, you would say, from this result. But for skim milk powder, it was a little bit different. Medium heat New Zealand products slipped by $30 a tonne or a 1% on the previous Pulse event, and it was $25 a tonne or 0.9% up on GDT 384. So, not a hugely material event probably, given the moves we've had in the last few weeks, fairly muted. But Arla's product, again, not much movement, fell $5 a tonne, 0.2% on the previous Pulse, and it was $20 a tonne higher on the prior GDT auctions. So, some mixed results, but nothing too startling there probably, Steve, you'd have to say.
No, but we're looking forward to the next auction, as we always do.
As we always do.
So where does it leave us? So in terms of the skim milk powder forward comparison, it's been mixed. New Zealand, that is affirmed. The US has got weaker. As I said, the growth indicators out of New Zealand remain positive, so watch that space. Interestingly, we haven't put it up here, Joe, but you showed the comparison of trade, so OTCs, and in the European context, the skim milk powder market looks similar.
Yeah.
Below that, EEX line there, trades are a good deal below that too.
And looking at butterfat comparisons, this is a US dollar comparison. The forward prices for EU have softened. New Zealand butter a little bit firmer, but yeah, interesting to see how that all lines up there, Steve. Still a bit of a spread.
So another update is we threatened that we'd talk more about US cheese. So cheese cold storage data came out. So the cheese stocks for American cheese, which includes cheddar, the one we watch most closely, stocks dipped a little. And you can see the history of the last couple of years there that they tend to dip, or they have tended to dip a lot harder at this time of year. A bit less production typically, but however this applies, given the fact that milk is surging at more than 3%, probably more than 4% if you look at milk solids, so you expect a pretty large increase in cheese output in the next report on June. So it implies some pretty decent usage or disappearance or a pending revision. So, taking that could have been a lot worse, that number there, and I think that's pretty interesting. So, Joe, charts of the week.
Yeah, look, after a bit of negotiation, we couldn't decide on just one chart of the week, Steve. So here we are with several.
A compendium.
Yes, and it's really around this US cheese demand piece, which is fairly critical for obviously the US market, but more broadly for the global cheese market. And our colleague Phil Plord regularly pulls out this Placer AI data, which is really interesting. It just shows what's happening to food service demand. So this is foot traffic for Big Pizza, the top pizza chains in the US. And we're just starting to see in Q2, that's really actually hard to see, but it's close to the line, a little bit better than the first quarter. So pizza trying to make a bit of a comeback, Steve, which is fairly important for cheese usage within the States. And this is one of the headline ones. Domino's is a very big chain, probably on the lower cost side of the pizza chains. And I saw some commentary from their CEO that says, the headwinds for pizza more broadly might be tailwinds for them because they are on the cheaper side of the offering. And not many of the others have reported their Q2 data as yet, but Domino's look like they are making a bit of a comeback after some slim quarters, at least in terms of that same store sales measure. Pretty encouraging. Going back to Placer AI and foot traffic, burger chains are still a bit underwater, Steve, although less worse than they were earlier in the year and for the last 2 quarters of 2024. So less down. So again, some more positive indicators that people are venturing out more into food service outlets, which is extremely important for cheese demand. And then we just thought we'd throw in this as well. Starbucks, obviously not a huge cheese usage occasion, but certainly for fluid milk. Still underwater, Steve. 6 quarters, consecutive quarters where they're down year on year in same-store sales. And we know from the commentary from the company, They're trying a lot of different things to appeal to, where consumers are at the moment, but it's looking pretty tough.
Yeah, it is. Good wrap there, Joe. That's that's interesting it might be US centric, but obviously US, as you said, US cheese demand is pretty critical for the world balance too right now. Okay, that's all from us. We will be back next week. Thank you very much for watching.